On the morning of September 11, 2001, a Tuesday that was supposed to be as ordinary as any other, the sky in New York was as blue as a gemstone, and the sunlight spilled unreservedly on the towering skyscrapers. The twin towers of the World Trade Center pierced the clouds. People in the buildings were busy starting their new day's work. The streets were bustling with traffic, and the subway roared through. Every corner of this city was full of vitality and energy, exuding the unique charm of the integration of economy and culture. However, the tranquility was ruthlessly shattered by a loud bang. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11, traveling at a speed of 490 miles per hour, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center like a deadly cannonball. In an instant, a huge fireball erupted from the impact site, accompanied by billowing smoke. Glass shards and building debris rained down from the high altitude. People on the streets below screamed in horror and fled in all directions, and the scene was in chaos. Just 17 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center again. Another violent explosion plunged the entire New York into unprecedented panic. At the same time, the Pentagon, the headquarters of the United States Department of Defense, was also hit. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. The huge impact caused the building, which symbolized the military power of the United States, to burst into flames, and part of its structure collapsed. And United Airlines Flight 93, after a heroic struggle between the passengers and the terrorists, crashed in a field in Pennsylvania, without causing more casualties among innocent people. This series of terrorist attacks that shocked the world resulted in nearly 3,000 deaths, countless families were torn apart, and the economic losses amounted to hundreds of billions of dollars. The financial, political, and social order of the United States and even the whole world was impacted unprecedentedly. People were plunged into deep fear and grief. And the mastermind behind all this was Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden's name spread to every corner of the world overnight and became a byword for terror and death. He was born into a wealthy merchant family in Saudi Arabia. His family had huge wealth and was closely related to the Saudi royal family. He could have spent his whole life in a comfortable environment, enjoying endless prosperity and wealth and living a life of luxury. But why did this rich young man, born with a silver spoon in his mouth, embark on a path of terrorism that made him an enemy of the world? What kind of experiences made such a huge change in his heart? What unknown stories were hidden behind him? These mysteries, like layers of thick fog, shrouded bin Laden's life and attracted countless people to explore his past and present. In 1957, Osama bin Laden was born in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, a city full of mystery and luxury. His family, the bin Laden family, was extremely prominent in Saudi Arabia. Second only to the Saudi royal family, it was an important part of the Saudi elite. Bin Laden's father, Mohammed bin Laden, was an extremely legendary figure. He started from scratch. With his extraordinary business acumen and deep piety towards Islam, he carved out his own territory in the construction field. In an era when oil resources were gradually becoming the lifeblood of the Saudi economy, Mohammed keenly grasped the huge demand for national construction. He led his team to undertake a large number of infrastructure construction projects. From the towering skyscrapers in prosperous cities to the sacred and solemn mosques, every inch of Saudi land bore the marks of the bin Laden family's buildings. His company, the Saudi Bin Laden Group, rose rapidly and became one of the largest construction companies in Saudi Arabia, with its wealth and influence growing day by day. Mohammed not only achieved great success in business but also actively engaged in charity, donating large amounts of funds to charitable institutions and religious organizations, winning widespread praise and respect in Saudi society. As the 17th child among Muhammad's many children, bin Laden was born under the halo of his family's glory and wealth. His childhood was carefree and full of luxury. The spacious and luxurious villa at home was like a palace, with its interior decorated in a resplendent manner. Exquisite carpets, magnificent chandeliers, and precious artworks all demonstrated the family's abundant financial resources. He had a dedicated servant team to take care of his daily life. Whether it was the preparation of delicious food or the selection of delicate clothes, he didn't have to worry about anything. In terms of education, the family provided him with the best resources, hiring excellent teachers from all over the world to teach him Arabic, English, mathematics, history, religion, and other subjects, cultivating him to be a cultured and accomplished person. As a child, bin Laden was lively and cheerful, full of curiosity about everything around him. He liked to play football with his little friends in the spacious courtyard, running and playing to his heart's content. Although his football skills were not outstanding, he always enjoyed it, relishing the joy brought by sports and the atmosphere of teamwork. Even when attacked by opponents on the field, he always remained polite, resolving issues in a gentle way and never getting into intense conflicts with others. He was also enthusiastic about watching cowboy movies. The stories full of adventure spirit and heroism deeply attracted him, making him yearn for the outside world. In his imagination, he could also bravely roam the world like the heroes in the movies and accomplish earth-shattering feats. However, the turn of fate always came so suddenly. When bin Laden was 9 years old, a terrible air crash mercilessly took away his father's life. This tragic news was like a blockbuster bomb, instantly shattering the peaceful and happy life that bin Laden had originally led. He couldn't accept his father's sudden departure. That once tall and majestic figure who had given him endless love and care could only be sought in his memories from then on. His father's death not only dealt a huge blow to bin Laden emotionally but also brought profound changes to his heart. He became introverted and taciturn, often sinking into deep thought alone and losing his former enthusiasm for the things around him. The Syrian journalist Ibrahim al-Jarbuni once mentioned in an interview that bin Laden's family told him that the death of his father made bin Laden feel as if he had lost his support, became extremely unconfident, always felt unrecognized, and lacked legitimacy in this world. This inner struggle and pain prompted him to constantly think about his future. He often talked with the people closest to him about his dreams and the things he longed to do but didn't know how to start. From a psychological perspective, the death of a loved one in childhood often causes huge trauma to a child's psychology, leading to changes in their personality and filling them with unease and confusion. Bin Laden was no exception. He tried to fill the void in his heart by finding new goals and meanings, which also laid the groundwork for him to embark on a completely different path in the future. As he grew older, bin Laden entered King Abdulaziz University, an elite school in Saudi Arabia, to continue his studies. This university gathered top-notch talents from Saudi Arabia and even the entire Arab world. The academic atmosphere was thick, and various ideas collided and blended here. Bin Laden initially chose economics and business administration, hoping to inherit the family's business tradition and show his prowess in the economic field. However, the wheels of fate began to turn quietly at this time. During his university years, bin Laden came into contact with a group of passionate and idealistic Islamic groups. They often got together to discuss the doctrines, history of Islam, and the various problems faced by the Muslim world at present. These discussions were like a series of keys, gradually opening the door to bin Laden's exploration of religion in his heart. At the same time, a religious teacher from the Muslim Brotherhood entered his life. This teacher was highly knowledgeable and had profound and unique insights into Islam. His courses and remarks were full of infectious power, deeply attracting bin Laden. Under the influence of the teacher, bin Laden began to study the Islamic classic, the Quran, in depth, as well as the related hadiths and interpretations of doctrines. He absorbed religious knowledge eagerly, spending a lot of time every day reading, thinking, and praying. His thoughts also gradually changed during this process. He began to oppose hedonism, believing that Muslims should return to the original doctrines of Islam, abide by strict religious norms, and abandon worldly pleasures and extravagance. This change in his thoughts was also evident in his daily life. He was no longer as enthusiastic as before about parties, playing, and watching movies. Instead, he gradually drifted apart from his childhood friends and devoted himself wholeheartedly to religious activities. He began to strictly abide by the dietary regulations of Islam, performing the 5 daily prayers on time and being meticulous about every detail of the religious rituals. He also actively participated in the activities of various religious societies and organizations, discussing with like-minded people how to revive the Arab world and make Islam regain its former glory. From a psychological perspective, bin Laden's religious transformation was closely related to his growth experiences and inner needs. The death of his father in childhood left him with a sense of unease and confusion, and he had been constantly looking for something that could give him a sense of belonging and identity. The doctrines and concepts of Islam happened to meet his psychological needs, allowing him to find the direction and goal of his life. In addition, the weak position of the Arab world on the international political stage at that time, as well as the various injustices and oppressions suffered by the Muslim community, also inspired his sense of justice and mission, prompting him to want to fight for the dignity and rights of the Muslim world through his actions. In his in-depth study of the Quran, bin Laden became deeply interested in the theory of jihad. The theory of jihad has complex connotations in Islam. It not only includes the just wars that Muslims fight to defend their beliefs and resist foreign invasions but also involves the meaning of individuals struggling against inner evil at the spiritual level. However, bin Laden's understanding of the theory of jihad gradually deviated towards extremism. He believed that in today's world, Muslims were facing a serious threat from the Western world. Western culture, values, and political systems were eroding the foundation of the Islamic world. In order to protect the purity of Islam and the interests of Muslims, a comprehensive jihad must be launched to completely expel Western forces from the Islamic world. The formation of this extreme ideology was not achieved overnight but was influenced by multiple factors. On the one hand, the political situation in the Middle East at that time was turbulent. The conflicts between Israel and Arab countries were continuous, and the military interventions and political manipulations of Western countries such as the United States in the Middle East made bin Laden deeply angry and dissatisfied. He witnessed the sufferings of his Muslim compatriots in the war and regarded it as an aggression and oppression of the Islamic world by Western forces. On the other hand, some extreme religious ideas and groups that he came into contact with also played a role in promoting and exacerbating his ideas. These ideas and groups emphasized the use of violent means to achieve religious and political goals, providing bin Laden with theoretical support and action guidelines. Bin Laden's religious transformation and the formation of extreme ideas not only changed his personal fate but also had a profound impact on the whole world. He began to devote all his energy and wealth to the so-called jihad cause, forming terrorist organizations and planning terrorist attacks, becoming the number one terrorist in the eyes of the international community. And the grudges and feuds between him and the United States thus began. In 1979, the international situation was changing rapidly, and Afghanistan, a land that had endured many hardships, became the focus of world attention. On December 27, the Soviet army, with lightning speed, crossed the border and invaded Afghanistan. Their tanks and armored vehicles formed an iron torrent, rampaging wantonly on the land of Afghanistan. Wherever they went, dust billowed and gunpowder smoke filled the air. The cities and villages of Afghanistan were instantly plunged into the flames of war. Innocent civilians fled in all directions in the hail of bullets. The cries, shouts, and explosions intertwined, playing a tragic human tragedy. The Soviet invasion was not accidental. Against the backdrop of the Cold War, Afghanistan's unique geographical location made it an important strategic target in the power struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union attempted to further expand its influence in the Middle East by controlling Afghanistan and achieve its strategic ambition of moving southward to the Indian Ocean. Moreover, the turbulent political situation in Afghanistan, with the growing contradictions between the pro-Soviet regime and the anti-Soviet forces, also provided an opportunity for the Soviet invasion. For bin Laden, the Soviet invasion was like a blockbuster bomb, completely shattering his originally peaceful life. His heart was filled with anger and a sense of mission. His strong religious beliefs and hatred for the invaders prompted him to resolutely join the war against the Soviet invasion. In his view, this was a jihad to defend Islam, and every Muslim had the responsibility and obligation to take up arms to defend their homeland and beliefs. Bin Laden was well aware that to achieve victory in this war, relying solely on his personal strength was far from enough. So, he used his family's wealth and influence to travel around, recruiting volunteers. His call was responded to by many Muslims. Hot-blooded young people from Arab countries such as Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Yemen came in admiration and joined his team. These young people, with their piety towards Islam and yearning for freedom, bid farewell to their hometowns and relatives and embarked on a journey full of unknowns and dangers. In Pakistan, Bin Laden jointly founded the Maktab al-Khidmat organization with the Palestinian Abdullah Azzam. The main task of this organization was to provide manpower and financial support to the Afghan resistance organizations. They established several training camps in the border areas between Afghanistan and Pakistan and conducted military training for the recruited volunteers. The conditions in these training camps were extremely harsh. There were no modern training facilities, nor sufficient food and water sources. The volunteers could only sleep in simple tents every day and eat simple meals, but they had no complaints at all. They still trained hard, making full preparations for the upcoming battles. During the training process, Bin Laden led by example and shared joys and sorrows with the volunteers. He personally taught them how to use weapons, how to conduct tactical cooperation, and how to survive in harsh environments. He also instilled extreme religious ideas in them, emphasizing the sacredness and justice of this war, making them firmly believe that they were fighting for Allah and for the dignity and freedom of the Muslim world. Under his influence, these volunteers gradually formed a firm belief and a strong sense of mission. They were willing to sacrifice their lives to achieve the so-called jihad goals. As the war escalated, Bin Laden realized that relying solely on loose resistance organizations was difficult to pose an effective threat to the Soviet army. So, in 1988, he decided to establish a more rigorous and radical organization, the Al-Qaeda organization. The establishment of this organization marked a new stage in Bin Laden's jihad cause. The members of the Al-Qaeda organization were mostly extremists who had undergone strict screening and training. They were absolutely loyal to Bin Laden and were willing to unconditionally execute his orders. On the Afghan battlefield, Bin Laden and the members of his Al-Qaeda organization fought fiercely against the Soviet army. They adopted guerrilla tactics, taking advantage of the complex terrain and mountainous areas in Afghanistan to engage in guerrilla warfare with the Soviet army. They sometimes attacked the Soviet Army's supply lines and sometimes ambushed the Soviet Army's patrols, making the Soviet Army constantly on the defensive. In one battle, Bin Laden personally led a small team to launch a sudden attack on a Soviet military base. They quietly sneaked into the base under the cover of night and then launched an attack suddenly. The Soviet Army was caught off guard by this unexpected attack and was thrown into chaos for a while. Bin Laden and his team members took the opportunity to fight bravely, causing heavy losses to the Soviet army. The victory of this battle greatly inspired the morale of the Al-Qaeda organization members and also made Bin Laden famous among the resistance organizations. However, war is cruel, and Bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda organization also paid a heavy price. Many members sacrificed in the battles, and Bin Laden himself narrowly escaped death several times. But these setbacks did not make him flinch. Instead, they made his determination to resist the Soviet invasion even firmer. He constantly adjusted his tactics, improved his weapons and equipment, and continued to fight tenaciously against the Soviet army. During this 10-year-long war, Bin Laden not only received military training but also his thoughts underwent further changes. He witnessed the great pain and disasters brought by the war to the Afghan people. He saw countless families torn apart and loved ones separated by life and death. These scenes made him develop a deeper hatred for the Western world, especially the United States. He believed that the United States, which supported the Soviet invasion from behind, was the chief culprit of this war. At the same time, he was also disappointed with the governments of Arab countries such as Saudi Arabia, believing that they were weak and incompetent in the face of the Soviet invasion and did not give sufficient support and help to the Afghan people. This change in his thoughts made bin Laden's jihad concept even more extreme. His goals were no longer limited to driving out the Soviet invaders but also included overthrowing the corrupt and incompetent governments in the Arab world, expelling the forces of Western countries from the Middle East, and establishing a pure Islamic state. His extreme ideas laid the groundwork for his full-scale confrontation with the United States in the future. In 1989, under the pressure of the international community and the tenacious resistance of the Afghan resistance organizations, the Soviet Union finally announced its withdrawal from Afghanistan. The 10-year-long Afghan war ended with the failure of the Soviet Union. Bin Laden and his al-Qaeda organization played an important role in this war, and their names were engraved in the long river of Afghan history. However, the end of the war did not make bin Laden stop his steps. Instead, he returned to his homeland, Saudi Arabia, with the experience and strength accumulated in the war, as well as more extreme ideas, ready to face new challenges. And the grudges and feuds between him and the United States would intensify in the coming years, eventually leading to a terrorist attack that shocked the world. During the jihad years in Afghanistan, there was a complex and delicate cooperative relationship between bin Laden and the United States. At that time, the United States, considering its strategic goal of confronting the Soviet Union during the Cold War, regarded Afghanistan as an important battlefield to contain the Soviet Union's southward expansion. The resistance organizations led by bin Laden, because of their firm anti-Soviet stance and influence in the local area, became forces that the United States saw as utilizable.